Danny reached their side of the pool. He could hear their conversation from here. Are you all right? Yes, fine. What about your headache? It's nearly better. Did you eat something this morning? Of course. I've been stuffing myself with all these snacks. And I walked all the way down to the pool without any help. She was trying to please him. It had taken two of the hotel staff, one on each side, to get her down the steps and through the hotel gardens. Good. Well done. Where's Danny? In the pool. He's been swimming for hours. He must be worn out. Danny's heart glowed with gratitude. She always stood up for him. He looked away and tried even harder to make it seem like as if he was swimming. His father was frowning critically at him, he knew. Call that swimming? He wrenched at the scorn in his father's voice. The boy's helpless. I'd pay for a teacher only if I knew it wouldn't be a waste of money. Danny, he raised his voice. Come on out. It's time to go home. Zinni, get Miscreet, and we can't waste the whole day lounging around here. Danny floundered at the ladder at the side of the pool and climbed up it. He looked up briefly into his father's eyes, then looked down again. If he let his father's read the fear and resentment in his face, it would only make things worse. He picked up the towel and his bundle of clothes lying on the grass under Zinni's chair and moved off towards one of the changing rooms, a pretty booth made to look like a typical rural Ethiopian farmer's hut. I hate him. I really do hate him, he muttered gluttonly to himself as he pulled on his t-shirt and shorts. As he left the booth, he looked up at the sky. A fan-shaped cloud was blowing up against the vast expanse of blue sky, and a sudden sharp breeze was stirring the red hibiscus flowers on the hedges by the entrance to the pool. It almost looked like it might rain. Chapter 2. The bus with Mambo and Murja on board was 2 hours into its journey when the rain began. It came on with sudden fury and with such fury and suddenness that the driver nearly skidded off a narrow ribbon of the road onto one of the fields of fresh green barley that stretched away into the distance. The drops slashed against the window at the back of the bus where Mambo was squashed in beside Murga. He stared at it unseeingly. Like everything else that had happened today, it seemed unreal, unbelievable, as if it was the worst kind of dream. While the bus had been weaving through the crowded outskirts of Addis Ababa, hooting its way through the dense traffic, Mammo had kept struggling, trying to get past Murga, and forced his way to the door. He had stormed and wept and even shouted out that he was being kidnapped and pleaded with the passengers around him to help. But Murga had made a joke of it, telling everyone that Mammo was a runaway and that he was going to take him home to his father to get the thrashing he deserved. The whole bus had obviously believed him. Even if Mammo had been able to get past Murga, he'd have to be stopped by a dozen others before he possibly could reach the door. He'd given up at last. He stared out at the window with a growing feeling of hopeless desperation as the bus had grounded up a steep mountain road above the city, leaving the familiar tangle of streets behind to emerge at the top of a vast, high plateau stretching emptily away on all sides. He'd never been out of the countryside before. It terrified him. He started going over everything in his mind. For the moment, Murga's dark shape had appeared in the doorway. Was Murga really his uncle after all? His mother had never said anything about having a brother. She never mentioned any relatives at all. And if Murga was her brother, why had he asked about Mamba's father? Didn't he know that his father had disappeared almost as soon as Mamba had been born? And why hasn't Murga even heard of Tigis? But then, on the other hand, if Murga wasn't his mother's brother, how'd he know she was dead? How'd he know Mama's name? Why had he come? If he had just been a thief looking for some stuff to steal, why had he paid a fortune for bus fares to take the two of them all the way out of Addis Ababa? Maybe there was nothing to worry about. Perhaps it could turn out all right after all. Where are we? He asked for the 100th time. Where are we going? How much farther is it? Stop your play acting, Murga said loudly, looking sideways at the man crammed into the seat at the opposite side of Mamba. You know where we're going. Home to your father, you little rascal. Mamba shivered. He hadn't been wrong. Murga wouldn't talk like that if he only wanted to help him. The rain had long since the rain was long since when at last they stopped. Mama had no idea how many hours they had passed. It seemed like a lifetime. He followed Murga off the bus. They were standing on a dusty patch of open ground in what seemed to be in the middle of a little town. Single-story shops ran along the dirt road in both directions, but they soon petered out into open country. Mamba's heart began to thump. Now perhaps was his chance to make a break for it. His eyes darted about, looking for a sign, a clue of anything that might give him an idea. A couple of trucks were pulling up on the far side of the road, facing back the way the bus had come. Maybe, if he managed to give Mamba the slip, he could sneak under the tarpaulin onto the back of one of them and hitch a secret ride back to Addis Ababa. Or perhaps he could hide somewhere in the town, anywhere, and get on the next bus home. He'd try to creep under one of the seats so that the conductor wouldn't see him and throw him off for not being able to pay. Not many of the passengers had left the bus in this little place. A few had jumped off to run into the bar nearby and grab a glass of tea or visit the toilet. The bus was sounding its horn now, trying to hurry them back on board. Perhaps, thought Mamba, he could pretend to need the toilet too. And once inside the bar, he could run through to the back, climb over the wall, and get away. I need to go in there to the toilet, he said to Murga, edging away from him towards the door of the bar. Murga's hand shot out and caught his arm onto a vicious grip above his shoulders. You can wait, he said. I know what you're up to. What's your problem anyways? I thought you wanted a job. Look at all the trouble I'm going to get you one. The last passenger hurried back and climbed aboard. The conductor shut the door. The old engine coughed and wheezed as the bus lumbered off down the road. As Mumbo watched it go, cold desolation swept over him. The bus was his last link to Addis Ababa, with Tigis and home. Its clunking noise had begun to sound almost comforting. Now he was surrounded by a horrible, eerie silence like nothing he had ever known before. He was used to the constant ding of the city. Murga, still gripping his arm, was standing still, turning his head impatiently as he looked in turn in each direction. He seemed to be waiting for someone. At last he gave a grunt and set off in a fast pace down the road, dragging Mama along with him. A middle-aged man was coming towards them. He was dressed like a farmer with a heavy white shama draped around his shoulders. He carried a thick stick, and his feet below the ragged legs of his trousers were bare. Murga stopped when they reached him. Good day. Good day. How are you? I'm well. How is everything? All is well, thank God. Thank God. They exchanged the usual greetings quickly, without enthusiasm. The man spoke Aramaic with a slow country accent. quite different from the fast city patter Mamba was used to. This is the boy then, the farmer said, looking critically at Mamba. Bit small, isn't he? Murga laughed. He's strong. Look at him. 14 last month. He held up his arms. He held up the arm he was still holding from the farmer to inspect. The farmer frowned down at Mamba, but his eyes were not unkind. What work have you done before? Oh, all kinds of things, Mamba broke in quickly before Mamba could say a word. Running errands, portering, helping out round the cattle market. No, objected Mamba, but Murga's fingers bit even deeper into his arm, and he subsided. All right, the farmer jerked his head. It's a deal. He reached a hand under his voluptuous shama, looking for the pocket in his shirt. He pulled out a thin wad of notes and counted them into Murga's hands. Mamba suddenly understood. Murga was selling him. He was being sold. He was being snatched away from Abada and Tegis just so that this people thief could make some money. For a moment, he was too shocked to react. Murga was staring down crazily at the money in his hands. What's this? We agreed 150, buyer. 130, said the farmer. 150, Murga raved the note in the other man's face. And the bus fares? 2 of us out of here in my return? The farmer shrugged. That's all I got. It'll have to do. Take him back if you don't like it. Mamba was suddenly warned by a brief flame of hope flaring up inside him. A bargain, Murga was growling now. Look at all the trouble I've gone to, coming out all this way. All right, the farmer said sourly. If you want the rest of the money, you'll have to come and fetch it from my house. It'll be a long walk in those fancy shoes. Murga hesitated. The farmer's grin widened. It seemed to flick Murga in the raw. Let's go then, he said angrily. What are we waiting for? You won't get another bus back to Addis tonight if you come home with me, the farmer said, looking uneasy now. You'll have to put me down then, won't you? Said Murga. I'll come home with you, get the money, and go back to Addis in the morning. The hope in Mamba's heart dwindled to nothing. There was to be no way out. This man was his new boss, his master. Working for him was to be his new life. He was going to be a farm boy and live miles away from anywhere. Murga's hand, which hadn't slackened his grip at all this while, moved now from his arm up to his collar. Mamba felt it like a shackle on his neck. It would be impossible for him to break away. All the terrible things he'd ever heard about the wild lands outside the city came flooding into his mind. Hyenas and jackals roaming about at night, people said. Everyone who had to work from dawn to dusk. When the rain failed to come, the people starved. A sob rose in his chest. He swallowed it down. He mustn't let himself give up yet. He mustn't let himself give up yet. There might still be a chance to escape if he kept his wits about him. They were walking fast out of the little town now. Rolling countryside stretched out on all sides, frightening, vast and empty, while above the sky seemed more huge and distant than he'd ever seen at home. The track they followed was uneven and littered with large stones. Murga suddenly stumbled over one of those, and for a moment his grip on Mamba's collar slackened. In an instant, Mamba had snatched his chance. He broke free and gathered himself to run, but before he had taken a single step, the The farmer had thrusted his stick between his legs, trapping him up. Mambo fell full length onto the ground, grazing both of his hands. Here, you hold him, the farmer growled to Murga. He reached under his shama again and pulled out a length of rope. Quickly, he tied one end of the rope around Mamba's neck. Try running away again, he said with a dry humor, and you'll end up strangling yourself. The next couple of hours seemed to Mamba at last to last forever. He was exhausted, famished and parched with thirst, and his feet were horribly pinched inside his old shoes. His throat was tight with misery. His heart felt like lead inside of his chest. His face burned with shame at the feel of the rope around his neck. He felt like a slave, an animal, a thing. I've been sold, he kept thinking, the words running round and round in his head, like a donkey or a goat. That man sold me. He just put me up for sale and sold me like a sack of flour. It was nearly dark when at last the farmer turned off the rough road that they'd been following for the last hour. Mamba stumbled after him up a narrow path between two fields. Thick cactus hedges, too high to be seen over, grew on each side. The lane turned into a sharp corner, and settling in front of them was the entrance to a small compound. Two huts, their mud walls crumbling and their thatch thin and ragged with age, were clustered together inside the thick thorn and cactus fence. 3 or 4 cows and a few sheep and goat turned their head to look at the new arrivals, and the little boy with thin legs and a big round belly, naked except for a ragged shift that barely reached his belly button, let out a frightened wail at the sight of the strangers and bolted into the biggest of the huts. A woman came out, wiping her hands on the long gathered skirt of her dress. Is this the boy then? She said to the farmer. What's his name? Mama, said Murga, stepping forward. He and the farmer seemed to have buried their mutual resentments. They had been talking in a friendly enough manner for at least half the hour of the journey. The woman exchanged the usual greetings with Murga, but with little enthusiasm. She didn't seem surprised to see him, but threw her husband a look that seemed to say, I told you so. Come in, she said, leading the way into the hut. Casually, as if he was unbridling a horse, the farmer untied the rope from around Mamba's neck, and Mamba, whose spirits had lifted for just a little at the thought that at least he might now get a drink and something to eat, followed the others inside. Darkness had already fallen with African suddenness when Tiggis came hurrying home down the little lane. On the other hand, she was bursting with her news. On the other, she wasn't sure how Mamba was going to take it. She undid the padlock and went inside. The shack was empty, but she wasn't surprised. Mamba would be somewhere, anywhere with a neighbor, maybe, or hanging out outside the little shop by the main road, which sold CDs and cassettes. He liked sitting on the wall up there, listening to the music, which blared out all day long from the makeshift loudspeakers. She lit the lamp and set it on a rickety table. Then she took the bread Miss Farka had given her out of the plastic bag she'd been carrying. The bread would be stale and unsellable by tomorrow, so it meant nothing to Miss Farga to let her take it. But it had been kind of her to add a few eggs as well. There'd be enough supper for both of them tonight. She set out about lighting a fire so that she could cook the eggs, listening out for Mamba. Then she heard steps outside the shack. Mamba, she cried out, come in, I got so much to tell you about. It was Miss Hannah, though, who answered her. There you are, dear, she said, stepping into the shack, her baby balancing on her hip. I came to see if you and Mamba wanted some supper. There's plenty for you both. Tixa had been squatting by the fire, feeding it with sticks, but she stood up to hug Miss Hannah. You've been so nice to us, she said. I don't know what I've done without you. Miss Hannah patted her shoulder. I know what it's like to lose your mother, she said. Even when you're a brave girl, I'd help you more if I could. Take a step back and beamed at her. I won't need any more help. I I won't need anyone to help me now, she said. Everything's going to be fine. I went to see Miss Fraga today. She's given me a job. I'm going to work in her shop, run errands, help around the back, even serve customers when she shows me how. She's going she's going to get me a new dress tomorrow and some shoes, and she says I can sleep in the storeroom. The baby had started to drizzle. Miss Hannah gave him her knuckle to suck and beamed back at Tigges. That's wonderful. Quite frankly, my dear, I was worried about you. I didn't see how you were going to manage. Let's hope your uncle finds something as good for Mamba. My uncle? Tigges looked puzzled. What uncle? He came around this morning, said he got a job for Mamba. Mama went off with him to see about it. That's funny, Tigges said slowly. We haven't got any uncles. Not that I know about. We've never knew anyone from my father's family. He came from up north, and Ma said both her brothers were killed in the war. Perhaps it was a cousin then, or a friend even, Miss Hannah said comfortably. Mamba will tell us all about it when he comes back. If he ever does. You know what boys are like. They take off suddenly and never bother to let their families know they're all right. Yes, said Tigges, her face clearing. It's a bit of a relief, to be honest, Miss Farga. She said, Miss Farga said she'd let him sleep in the shop with me till he got fixed up, but I could see she wasn't very keen. I can't believe it. Both of us getting a job in one day. I hope his is as nice as mine. I'm moving in the shop tomorrow. If Mama doesn't get back till I'm gone, will you let him know where I'm at? You're giving this place up then? Said Miss Hannah, looking around at the dingy walls and uneven mud floor. Oh, yes, said Tigges happily. It's a horrible house anyways. I won't miss any of it at all. Except for you, of course. But I'll come and see you sometimes when I can. It's going to be so lovely working for Miss Farha. She's got the sweetest little baby. Not as nice as yours, of course. And I'm going to look after her sometimes when Miss Farfa is busy. Can I really come to supper with you? I want to tell you everything, all about the shop and my dress and the place where I'm going to sleep.